that, but people can just Google it if they want. It was actually quite disturbing to listen to because of the bloodthirstiness of it. Putting that aside, there is something larger here that's more political, I guess, than what we've been talking about, but I think equally troubling, which is this is not just about the legality of a double tap strike and whether or not it was a war crime, which is obviously a very serious question. But we have now conducted 22 attacks. By my calculations, about 84 people have been killed in these attacks. We have a president who has said not unequivocally, that he is going to start doing attacks on land. We are clearly in some sort of war with Venezuela, and yet we have not had any rationalization, legal justification, or thorough explanation from the administration about what we are doing here. And on top of that, save what happened yesterday on the Hill where they brought up Admiral Bradley and they got to see some of this video, and it's only a handful of them that got to see some of this video. For the life of me, I can't recall actual congressional oversight or interest in what is going on here. There's not really been public hearings or discussion about this, unless I'm missing something. And beyond that, of course, Congress does have a constitutional role in authorizing war. It is an abdication of the responsibility to not do more, and that is troubling, right? I mean, what David's talking about is troubling. The fact that it is breaking down on partisan lines is troubling. There is obvious need for oversight and more public accountability, and we're just losing any semblance of that as we march more and more into an open conflict. It's very scary. For the folks at Turning Point and for the folks who enjoy watching or want to actually watch these murders, war crimes, what are they? Close up to see the suffering. There's this story. The family of a Colombian fisherman killed in a separate September boat strike filed this complaint this week with the D.C.-based Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The complaint filed by the man's wife and 4 children seeks compensation and an end to the killings. In the complaint, the man's family alleges his death was an extrajudicial killing. It names Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as being responsible and adds that his actions were ratified by President Trump. The family's lawyer says they have faced threats since speaking out publicly. Last month, the president of Colombia posted on social media that the man may have actually been transporting illicit goods due to poverty, but did not deserve the death penalty. He also noted that the boat would never have reached the United States. Jonathan Lemire, David wrote, I'm curious where, for example, the briefing yesterday, where does it go next? Does it lead to hearings? Will evidence be handed over? What is the process for some sort of oversight?
Yeah, it's unclear what next steps are. We have heard Republicans, including some on our air, suggest, like Congressman Turner yesterday from the House Armed Services Committee, suggesting, look, Congress has not signed off on these attacks. We would have real reluctance if the president were to escalate them on land, but yet there hasn't actually been much of a mechanism, David wrote, for the Congress to step in and to try to like just beyond what we saw yesterday to really get to the bottom of this. And we have. You know, and the timing of this shouldn't be lost. The examination, the close scrutiny that this strike, the September 2nd strike, has received also comes on the same day that the Signalgate Inspector General's report was made public. Pete Hegseth looks bad there as well in terms of, you know, as it was put, that he was putting American military personnel at risk by sharing these war plans on Signal and inadvertently with a journalist. And yet we have him on social media yesterday doing a performative victory lap and like sort of strutting about like, look, I'm under this pressure, but we're just going to push the button and hit another boat.
And I'll be honest, in Afghanistan, the Taliban saw drone strikes as cowardly, that American forces weren't willing to come fight them face-to-face on the ground. And not that, you know, we're just going to make the drug traffickers angry, but it's just this idea that our technology and just wiping out people are all going to roll over and give up. A, and then B, and I want to be optimistic about the possibility maybe of some oversight here. I look to the Senate Armed Services Committee. There are members of that committee that deeply regret voting for Pete Hegseth. He's defied them Eldridge Colby, the head of policy, has not given them the basic information they want as he's trying to dramatically reduce U.S. efforts to help Ukraine. And then they recently spoke out this week about this pardon of the Honduran president, and it infuriates them and makes them baffled at what policy this is, that it's okay, again, to smuggle cocaine through Honduras, 500 tons of it, but you're going to take out these boats. Tom Tillis, Bill Cassidy, Todd Young, and Susan Collins all have said this whole policy is incoherent and ineffective in terms of actually stopping the fentanyl, which isn't on these boats, and we've talked about that. So that's, and you need one vote, if I'm right about this, on the Senate Armed Services Committee to back aggressive subpoenas that ask for the entire video. And he's the chair. And
I would think he would have an opinion about this as well.
Yes.
Bill, on something Sam said. Senate Armed Services Committee has its responsibility. There's this other committee called the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Why are they not holding hearings on what are U.S. interests in Venezuela?
Yeah.
About what are about regime change? Is that what we're about? If so, why? What are we trying to accomplish if we have regime? Is it economic interests, oil? Is it stopping immigration, which is largely slowed? Venezuela is not central to the drug trade. Nearly, if you really want to invade countries that are involved in the drug trade, Mexico and China are much more central to fentanyl than anything going on in Venezuela. That's obviously preposterous. What happens if we succeed at regime change? How do we make sure Venezuela doesn't descend into this something that looks like Gaza with gang warfare and so forth? This is a big foreign policy issue. How much force are we prepared to use? What if that doesn't work? Why is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on vacation here? Why are they not holding hearings to ask the administration and educate the public about what could be the biggest foreign policy, military commitment of this administration?
Yeah, and they voted him in. ms.now senior national security reporter David Rode, thank you very much. Everyone stay with us. Still ahead on Morning Joe, President Trump, New York Attorney General Letitia James. That's according to two law enforcement officials briefed on the case speaking to ms.now. Federal prosecutors had attempted to secure a new indictment against James on charges of mortgage fraud. This after initial charges were dismissed by a judge last month. It's worth noting that it is exceedingly rare for a grand jury to refuse to indict a case. The standard that prosecutors have to meet in order to indict is low, only requiring the majority of jury members to find a probable cause of a crime. The two sources tell ms.now the DOJ is planning to try again and could present the case as early as later today. One person familiar with the plan tells ms.now, quote, there should be no premature celebrations by Letitia James or her team. A Justice Department official declined to comment. So, Jonathan, the White House, just that retribution campaign, it's every day goes to a different length when they try again and again with a case like Letitia James, which is one signature on a mortgage application.
Yeah, another stumble
from
here.
Years ago.
Yeah, another stumble here. This is about originally dismissed because of Lindsay Halligan, the acting U.S. attorney. Courts found that she was not appointed properly, so therefore, with both Tish James and former FBI Director James Comey, those indictments were tossed aside. But Sam Stein, the retribution campaign has been faltering, shall we say, to this point, but the president and his team want to persist. They say they're going to go back at Letitia James. We don't know if they'll go back yet on Director Comey. There's talk of expanding it to other members of Congress or former Obama officials. So it has been, to this point, pretty Keystone Cops, but yet at the same time, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that these things keep falling apart, at least for now, that this remains an extraordinarily dangerous abuse of, I would argue, of presidential power and blurring the lines entirely between the West Wing and the Department of Justice to try to enact some sort of legal punishment against the president's perceived foes.
Yeah, I mean, this is embarrassing. Obviously, let's just call it what it is. The failure to get an indictment from the grand jury. Remember, they had already failed to get several other indictments in several different cases. This isn't like Major League Baseball, where if you go, 1 for 3, it's a success, right? Like this is bad stuff. On top of that, it's a huge waste of resources. But obviously, the problem here is that they completely gutted the Eastern District of Virginia's department because they were pressing so hard to bring charges against Letitia James and James Comey. All the actual real lawyers in the office said no, and then they quit or were fired. And I think we need to step back a little bit because obviously this is an abuse of power and it's just using the Justice Department to go after your foes. But what's really happening here is a massive evisceration of our justice system, not just because it's about Letitia James and James Comey, but you can add the pardon stuff that we alluded to in the last block, but that's been really rampant this week. The president's use of pardon power on the other side of his use of political prosecutions is making the Justice Department sort of a play toy, right? This past week, he pardoned someone who his own Justice Department had indicted in July. What is the point? What are our lawyers doing bringing these indictments and cases forward if on a whim, the president's going to say, you know what, I don't like the fact that this guy got a judgment against him, I'm going to undo it. So we are going to have massive disrepair to our Justice Department, our justice system, that is going to take generations maybe to put back together.
Coming up, the Fed is just days away from a major decision on interest.
What we saw earlier, lower incomes are still losing ground.
And Steve, you're right. I mean, a lot of Republicans, frankly, even some White House aides acknowledge affordability is a crisis. It's just the president himself. That's the disconnect. He simply won't say it, at least not yet. Let's continue your fact check with your final set of charts, which point out the flaws in Trump's claims about Obamacare and drug pricing. Here's what the president had to say.
Obamacare was made to make the insurance companies rich. Their stocks have gone up 1,000% in a short period of time. We have reduced drug prices by 500, 600, 700, 800, 900%, depending on the drug.
All right, so we heard the president. Steve, what do the numbers actually show?
Well, this is going to come as news to the drug companies because they don't think their stocks have gone up 1,000%, nor does anybody else for that matter. And he said a short period of time. I don't know what he means by a short period of time, but if you look at the last 5 years, for example, United Healthcare and Elevance are the two largest participants in the Obamacare insurance markets, and they do a lot of other things, and so it's not completely a pure analysis, but it's definitely directionally right. So their stock prices and the graphed against the S&P, which is in black here, you can see what happened. They did do well for a while, but now their stocks have gone all the way down here. Their stocks are about 25% above where they were 5 years ago. The S&P is up 100%. A little bit over 100% from where it was 5 years ago. So the stocks have barely done anything compared to the broader market. So that's just not true. But now let's look at his math skills. Most of us took 6th grade and 7th grade math. He says we're going to reduce drug prices by these huge numbers of percents. Let's just do basic math here. If you have a $60 drug, and you get a 50% price cut in that drug, it costs, and I won't ask Lemire, but I'm sure he knows, $30. If you get a if you have a $60 drug and they cut the price by 100%, it's free, right? 100% reduction in price goes to free. If you have a $60 drug again, and it goes down by 200%, what happens? They give you the drug for free. They pay you $60 to take the drug. So obviously, the idea that drug prices can go down by these amounts is ridiculous. The price of something simply cannot go down by more than 100%.
Coming up, one of the Democrats who urged American troops to defy illegal orders, Senator Alyssa Slotkin, is our guest when Morning Joe comes right back.
Bipolar 1 can overwhelm your mind. Sometimes depressive lows and unpredictable highs can make it hard to get out of your head.
Get to Moscow, Witkoff and Kushner met with Vladimir Putin. Putin said, no, I'm not interested in that balanced plan. And so it seems that we're back to square one. While this war continues, while the intense fighting, daily deaths of thousands of people continue. So what President Trump, who's committed himself to trying to bring peace to Ukraine, is going to do confronting this impasse, none of us know. But this was a week when you walk up the hill, you walk back down the hill, you end up where you started.
You know, it's kind of interesting because right before Thanksgiving, there's this rush of activity, right, where it seemed like they were trying to duplicate in the abstract the plan that had worked in Gaza, which is force a deadline, push a plan on all parties, and then give them ultimatums. And it just didn't work here. Why? I mean, what was, in your reporting, what was the key moment where this intense, frantic rush to get something signed and done before Thanksgiving suddenly was pulled back? Was it Rubio saying, no, actually, this is too much? Or was there some other, I don't know, actor who came in and stepped in, or moment that really mattered?
So I think there are two essentials, Sam. First, the parties are not as pliable as they were in Gaza. In Gaza, Hamas was exhausted, basically beaten. Israel, as our close ally, ends up doing what the United States asks. In this case, the Ukrainians felt that some of the terms that Trump was proposing were simply unacceptable, that there's no way that Zelensky could defend them to the Ukrainian public. And then the more fundamental mistake, I think, was they didn't understand that Vladimir Putin simply doesn't want a ceasefire or a peace agreement that doesn't give him his fundamental goals that he's been fighting for, that he's lost over 1 million casualties to try to get. And the administration, in its enthusiasm for doing a deal with Moscow, just doesn't seem to understand how determined Putin is here to say no.
David, thank you so much. Up next here on Morning Joe, a member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Alyssa Slotkin, will be with us to discuss the Inspector General's report on Signalgate is the hour, and we're following a number of stories. In major news that is sure to alter the media landscape, Netflix is set to buy Warner Brothers for $83 billion, a move that will significantly grow the world's biggest paid streaming service. We are in a new era of media here. CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin will join us shortly to break down that landmark deal.
Plus, the man arrested yesterday by the FBI accused of placing 2 pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC headquarters in Washington the night before the January 6th Capitol attack will make his first court appearance this afternoon. Meanwhile, a Pentagon Inspector General's report found that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth violated department policy and put troops at risk by using his personal cell phone to share sensitive military information in a group chat.
And this comes as the U.S. military struck another alleged drug smuggling boat in the Pacific Ocean, killing 4 so-called narco-terrorists. Once again, no evidence supporting the accusations about the boat or its passengers were provided by the administration. Also yesterday, a group of congressional leaders heard from Admiral Frank M. Bradley, the commander who oversaw that highly scrutinized September 2nd attack. Those lawmakers also viewed unedited footage of that strike for the first time. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Tom Cotton said, quote, he didn't see anything disturbing in that video.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down from the United States back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
Joining us now, Democratic member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan. She was one of the 6 lawmakers who released that video last month, reminding members of the military they can and must refuse illegal orders. So that looking quite prophetic at this point, if it was indeed an illegal order, if it is deemed that ultimately down the road. I'm curious, Senator, your reaction to what you just heard from Tom Cotton there.
Well, Senator Cotton, I saw the video. I did not. It contradicts a number of other reports I've heard from people who were in the room and watched the same video. I think, look, honestly, whether it's this crisis or the Signalgate crisis, the easiest thing to do is just be transparent with the American people. Just come and show your math. You know, if there's a video, let's see it. If there's an explanation and a TikTok that helps us explain this, show it to us. On Signalgate, if we had just had the Secretary of Defense own up to putting people at risk by putting sensitive details out on the open, an open line, at the beginning, we wouldn't be here. But that lack of transparency from the Secretary of Defense continues to hound him and boomerang on him.
Yeah, a lot of precedents that he's setting and not making it easy to sort of have an open mind about his approach to leadership, putting that lightly. I want to pull back on the boat strike from January 2nd to the entire operation. Is it lawful?
I think the thing that many of us have been asking a lot of questions on is, look, I think if you came to the Armed Services Committee and said, we want to have a real conversation about stepping up creative action against traffickers, drug traffickers, there's a lot of us who are, I said openly, I'm ready to have that conversation. There's plenty of times where we haven't done enough over years and years and years against these drug traffickers. But what's gone on now is we have a secret list of organizations that we're now in armed conflict with. We can't get access to that list. Who are we fighting? And then the legal justification for the whole operation is a classified document that even the operators can't see. So it just, as someone who was involved in operations against Al-Qaeda and ISIS and helping to target those organizations, there's a standard of just, again, showing your math. This is how we came to this list that's just not being met. So, again, I don't think the principles of the operations, a lot of us would be open to those. It's the way they've gone about it that's completely ham-handed.
And to your point of lack of transparency, let's remember on the Signalgate investigation conducted by the Pentagon Inspector General, Secretary Hegseth refused to even hand over his phone for that. Senator, we've talked to a number of Republicans this week who are sort of struggling, shall we say, to justify the sort of motive, if you will, of these strikes off the coast of Venezuela to prevent drugs, with the pardon of the Honduras president, who, of course, was prosecuted as a head of a drug cartel. And then others have expressed real misgivings about expanding the Venezuela operation, potentially to land strikes, which the president said could come at any time. What conversations are you having with your Senate colleagues about trying to, get in front of that?
Well, certainly if there's an idea that we're going to go start a land war against Venezuela, and just remember, I mean, the military of Venezuela is not comparable to the military of the United States. If we're going to do that, then that should come to Congress, right? And there's legislation right now on authorization of military force, just reminding everyone, per the Constitution, you should come to Congress and have that conversation with the American public, frankly, if we're going to get into another war. But the amount of force that's being brought into the Caribbean and off the coast of Venezuela, I mean, at this point, I heard it's already $1 billion just to move all this force into the area. It certainly is trying to send a signal. So again, when it comes to using force in our name, come to the American public, come to Congress and explain why you're doing this.
Senator Slotkin, earlier this week we played a clip from 2016 of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying the U.S. military would not follow unlawful orders, mirroring the message from you and your fellow Democratic lawmakers. Yesterday on social media, you posted these additional comments on the topic from the Secretary himself. Let's listen.
He says big, blustery things that people want to hear, but he goes way too far. And then when the military says, we won't follow illegal orders like torture or killing families, which is not loosening the rules of engagement, he suddenly realizes, wait, I might actually be commander-in-chief. And the problem here is that voters don't know whether you get the bluster Trump, or which is the armchair tough guy, or you get the one who walks it back on a statement now and says, no, I'll follow the law. The military's not going to follow illegal orders. And so the Trump campaign was forced to change their position and say, we're going to try to change the law so that the military can operate within the law. That's a tall order also.
Using his own words, we showed some of them earlier this week. Is the secretary fit for this job at this point? He seems to have completely changed on this very important part of being Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, well, I mean, whether it's this issue or, Signalgate or so many others, I think the thing that I'm used to as someone who worked at the Pentagon under Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, is the buck stops with the Secretary of Defense. You don't blame other people. You don't deflect. You own responsibility. And he wouldn't be the first Secretary of Defense to have complicated things happening during his tenure. So just own it. And then I think, secondly, when your leadership becomes a distraction from the mission of the organization you claim to care about, when we're all sitting here talking today about his leadership instead of about the amazing things that our military can do, the positive things, that to me means you're distracting from the mission, and you should do the right thing and step aside. And I think that from Signalgate on, that is how I felt.
Senator, before you go on this issue of the boat strike from September 2nd, what is the very least that you expect from your Republican counterparts?
I think we have to all be shown the video on the Armed Services Committee, and I think we need to have a hearing. I just basic oversight is all I'm asking for.
Democratic member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, thank you very much. So we'll see with the holidays and everything else. Do people just move on? Does Roger Wicker move on? Senator John Thune, some of these Republicans who I think are very committed to the Constitution.
Yeah, and Chris Matthews, we've been wrestling with that all week long. The idea we've had some Republicans speak out and express, even if quietly, some reservations about what's happening here. Let's get your thoughts, and particularly these last 48 hours or so, when this video is shown to lawmakers, and just a remarkable divergence of interpretation as to what happened. Where we just had Senator Cotton say, that it was completely justified, and that these two men hanging off the side of an upside-down burning boat still posed threats to U.S. military, when, of course, there were no military there. This was all done by drone, and suggesting they were a threat at that point to the American public miles and miles from shore is a little hard to wrap your arms around. And then we had Congressman Jim Himes, a somber lawmaker, say yesterday that in all of his years of public service, that video may have been the most disturbing thing he'd ever seen.
All this week I've been thinking about this word partisanship. The two parties are speaking in different partisan language. But it's not that simple. I look at the appointees of this administration. In order to get a job in this second term of Trump, you have to say that he won the 2020 election. You have to lie. You have to join him in that lie. And that's a real reality with all these appointees and what they say. And as for the elected officials, that guy the other day who said, well, it depends on the primary deadline. They're all worried about primaries next year because if they come from a ruby red state, they know they're going to be challenged by somebody more MAGA than they are, and therefore they have to stick in line. And I question, even in the Washington Post today, you cannot figure out, reading the Post today, whether Hegseth gave the order to kill them all or not. It says in one part, a couple of paragraphs, yes, he did, and in another couple of paragraphs, he didn't say it. So we're having a hard time getting objective truth out of these conversations, especially from Tom Cotton. I don't know what he's talking about when he described that scene that we've all learned about for the second strike. It doesn't sound like reality what he sees.
I mean, I again ask, where were they going? Where would they have been able to go? And how would they have been able to continue the operation? I mean, it sounds honestly like he thinks everybody listening to him is stupid, including his own colleagues and his boss. But that is his choice, and perhaps the tape will show us something. I think everybody should see it at this point. I agree with the senator. That needs to get out. There needs to be more transparency. But, Donnie, let's look at this from a political point of view. I'd love to get John Heilman's point of view as well. Where does this story and this narrative and following it, investigating it, fit into a grand strategy for Democrats and trying to keep the momentum that they have toward heading to the midterms?
Yeah, that's a great question. Democrats have got to be careful. You can get hooked into a shiny toy. I don't mean to say something that's as serious as these boat strikes.
It's very serious.
Call it a shiny toy, but I'm just talking about it as a distraction. You'll notice that Trump this week started to talk about affordability. The Democrats cannot lose their focus on affordability and health care. And obviously, this story has been dominating the news. It's not a voter story, though. And the Democrats have got to be careful. They have a gift. They have a single-minded gift. Don't let Trump take the megaphone on that. Stay on affordability. Once again, walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah.
The affordability issue is what helped Democrats win recent elections, and it's not going away.
No, and Donnie's right that President Trump has started talking about it, but for the most part, though, he's still calling it a hoax or a con job. Those around him are recognizing, hey, this is serious. The president, though, has yet to sort of engage with it.
Data shows it, too.
Yeah, engage in a real way, although he has scheduled an event in Pennsylvania next week. Perhaps his tone will change there. His aides say it will. We'll see. But new polling shows that a growing number of Americans, including Trump voters, are blaming the president for higher prices. A new Politico poll finds affordability is indeed the top issue for U.S. voters, with 56% saying the cost of living is their biggest concern. 46% say the cost of living is the worst they can remember. And when broken down by party, 37% of people who voted for Trump in 2024 share that view. The poll finds that roughly 1 in 5 Trump voters feel the president has had a chance to improve the economy, but hasn't taken it. And 46% of Americans say Trump holds most, if not all, responsibility for the state of the U.S. economy. That view is shared by 1 in 4 Trump voters. So, John Heilman, I mean, this connects with some things we've been talking about this week. A story I wrote back on Monday about Trump in this bubble, now sort of lost his feel for what the country really cares about. And affordability, an issue which, frankly, was one of the key ones that got him elected a year ago, is a real problem. And I heard from one former Biden aide this week who sort of ruefully acknowledged that they didn't handle affordability well, but sort of points out, well, it looks like Trump is falling into that exact same trap.
Yeah, Jonathan, I have to say, I hate to give you credit for anything.
I know it's tough.
Other than your love for the Boston Red Sox, but you were the person who pointed out to me a couple weeks ago when you came on my podcast. We were talking about the fact that Trump hasn't done a rally. I believe at that point, I think it's probably still true, hasn't done a Trump rally, one of his favorite thing in the world to do, since May, if I remember correctly. The notion that Trump, look, presidents are all in bubbles to some extent, but Trump, the lack of political engagement that he had in the course of 2025 out among the people, going and doing those rallies, traveling around America. Most of his travel in the course of this year has been foreign travel, which presidents love to do. People roll out the red carpet for you, literally sometimes, and certainly figuratively. But he does feel like he's lost. It does seem like he's lost some of his fingertip feel for the country, for the voters, and even for his own voters, which is, of course, been one of his superpowers, is that he's understood what the MAGA base wants, what it's feeling in a very visceral and pretty fine-grained way. To hear him earlier this week at that cabinet meeting, that endless cabinet meeting, talking about calling affordability a scam, a hoax, fake news, a Democratic fantasy. All the things that he said, he's the only person that I can find in the White House right now who talks that way, either publicly or privately. And it seems as though he just wants to talk about Joe Biden still, in the same way that he used to talk about Barack Obama. The further we get into this administration, the more those numbers that we saw that you put up are going to shift to where everyone is giving him responsibility for the economy. None of those numbers are going to shift towards Joe Biden. They're all going to shift towards Donald Trump. As long as he continues to be in denial about the affordability issue, he's got a political problem that's going to get worse and worse.
One more beat this block. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for Texas to use its newly redrawn congressional map that favors Republicans in the 2026 midterms. In an unsigned order issued yesterday, the court overturned a lower court ruling that found the map was likely an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. The majority said Texas is likely to succeed on the merits and criticized the lower court for intervening during an active primary season. Justice Samuel Alito, joined by Justices Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch, filed a concurrence, while the court's 3 liberal justices dissented. Justice Elena Kagan warned the ruling disserves millions of Texans. The map adds 5 GOP-leaning seats and will remain in place as litigation continues. Chris Matthews, your thoughts.
Well, I never liked this whole gerrymandering business. I know Texas started it. I don't like the way they did it. I know the Democrats had to respond. I understand that. Why Westmore doesn't want to respond. We have 1 Republican member of Congress in the whole state. But I think the numbers are going to be wrong. I think this next election is either going to be a change election or a hold election. I don't know anybody who believes it's going to be a hold election. I think it's going to be somewhere about 30-plus seats for the Democrats, a big win. I always thought that was small potatoes in Texas saying, oh, we're going to steal 6 votes for our side. It's going to be a much bigger change election. I think the people really want change. It started with New York and New Jersey and Virginia. It continued again in Tennessee, even though the Democrats didn't quite win. They picked up 13 points. All the measures say the public does believe in affordability. They believe it's a real problem for this president, and Trump is going to stay in denial. It's a good year coming for Democrats. I'd say 30 seats.
All right, Chris Matthews, thank you very much. His book, Lessons from Bobby, 10 Reasons Robert F. Kennedy Still Matters, is out now, and you can also hear about it on Donnie's podcast.
Yeah, by the way, guest of the year, the great Chris Matthews.
I know, the best hardball. Oh, all right, coming up on Morning Joe, the latest batch of inflation data is set to be released at the top of the hour. We're going to preview what those numbers